Well, thank you all very much. It's great seeing so many friends. And as they said on the video, when I did the town hall in Webster County on Eddie Melton's farm, it is like a family reunion every time I get to attend a function where there are a lot of Farm Bureau people. So it's been a few years since I've spoken at this convention. In fact, I think the last time I spoke was December of 2015 when I was in my last few days as being Commissioner of Agriculture. So it's great to be back and again to see so many friends and grassroots leaders in our movement to promote agriculture. I want to say, as I often do, Farm Bureau is the voice of agriculture, and having now served in Frankfort as a state representative and as Commissioner of Agriculture, and now in Washington as a member of Congress, I can say with confidence that there is no agriculture trade association, there's no agriculture association anywhere that's more effective in helping us preserve our family farmers and helping us promote rural America than the American Farm Bureau. And I can't say enough good things about the Kentucky Farm Bureau, your staff, your local boards, as well as your leadership. Mr. Haney, Eddie, Fritz, Drew, my buddy Jeff Harper, and all the team at Farm Bureau. Thank you for everything you do to promote agriculture, to lobby on behalf of our interest in Frankfort and Washington. I can say you are truly making a difference, and keep up the great work. You know, last night I got here, as soon as I landed from Washington, I came straight over and attended the president's reception, and I just had a great time last night walking around, seeing so many people I haven't seen in a few years, and everyone was commenting on my appearance. And, you know, it's over the last few years, my hair has gone in the direction of Mark Haney's, and I had an idea. I thought, you know, it's just hard to look in the mirror. And, you know, I used to be the young guy, and now with the white hair, I don't look young at all anymore. I look very old. So I'm going to grow a beard. And I think the beard will have some dark in it. And as you can see, the beard's whiter than my hair. So I was a little self-conscious about it, and everybody was talking, and I could tell most people didn't like it, you know. And I saw a lady last night that I really think a lot of. I've known her for many, many years. In fact, I think she judged a couple of the speaking contests that I was in when I was a kid in the Farm Bureau discussion meets and Farm Bureau Outstanding Youth Contest. And she looked at me. I was walking up to her, you know, and I wanted to say hi. She goes, "Jamie, is that you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "You know who I thought you were from a distance?" I said, "Who's that?" She said, "Dan Flanagan." Now, I like Dan. Dan may be here today. Is Dan Flanagan here? Dan's a good friend of mine. But I decided at that moment, I'm going to shave my beard before church Sunday. So, just so you know, this won't be around the next time we meet. But I was asked today to deliver remarks about Washington and an update on the issues that are most important to us and to we in agriculture. And I'm going to mention the Farm Bill, of course, and I'm going to talk a little bit about trade, give an update of where we are, and then I'll close with our farm labor situation. I will say the Farm Bill that we have finally gotten a compromise on, and that happened early last week, is a win for agriculture in rural America. And I'm going to go into some details about that. But before I do, I want to just make sure everyone remembers the history of the Farm Bills. You know, the Farm Bill is a piece of legislation that comes around every 5 years. So it's important that you get it right because it's a 5-year piece of legislation. And historically, it's a very difficult piece of legislation to pass. If you'll remember, 5 years ago, it failed on the House floor. And then again this year, when we had our first vote on the Farm Bill, it failed to get a majority of votes in the House of Representatives. And for a bill to become a law, it has to pass. It's just like in Frankfort. It has to pass the House of Representatives, then the Senate, and then the president signed it into law. But in Washington, it's a little different than Frankfurt. The House of Representatives passes one version of a major bill. The Senate passes their version of the bill, and then they try to iron out the differences, and there are always differences. It doesn't matter if it's the farm bill, if it's a budget bill, immigration bill, infrastructure bill, whatever the bill is, there will be differences. So when you look at the history of the farm bill and you wonder why is it so difficult to pass, I can throw out a statistic that several of you have heard if you've been to any of my town halls, and you'll start to understand why. Even though agriculture is the most important industry in America, and even though agriculture is one of the biggest industries in America, if you look at the House of Representatives today, there are 435 representatives. In Frankfurt, we have 100 representatives. In Washington, we have 435. And you've heard me say the biggest problem with Congress is there are too many congressmen, right? But 435 representatives. Of the 435, there are only 6 of us who have ever been a full-time farmer. 6 out of 435. And 2 of the 6, I'm very sad to say, lost their re-elections 2 weeks ago. So going into the next Congress, 4 farmers will return that had been full-time farmers. And I think we're picking up 1 and possibly 2. I'm going to check out the other guy who put that on his resume, but I've got a lot of people say they're a farmer and they're not. But we'll see. But the House version of the Farm Bill, we tried to do something a little different to try to get more Republican support because both parties, there's opposition among both parties for the Farm Bill, and there's support from both parties usually in the Farm Bill. We looked at the challenges in America, and if you talk to the business owners, they've got the same challenges that we have on the farm. They can't find workers. Good paying jobs, low paying jobs, high skilled jobs, low skilled jobs, whatever the industry is, there is a massive shortage of workers. And many of us are from smaller towns, and we know everyone. We know people that have milked the system, that are able-bodied, that could work, but it's more advantageous not to work. The government, and so through various forms of welfare, may pay people not to work. So we felt like, and I felt like, that there's never been a better time to get people off welfare and into the workforce than today in this strong economy where there's a shortage of workers in every field in America. And if we can identify people that could work, try to start transitioning them from welfare to work. And not just, overnight say it's going to happen, because many of these people are 3rd and 4th generation welfare recipients, but to try to put a workforce development component in there. And these people that we were wanting to transition from welfare to work, they weren't going to be engineers and medical doctors and things like that. These were going to be people that work in the restaurant industry, in the tourism industry, maybe the agriculture industry. And there's a massive shortage of workers there too. So we passed a bill that had a welfare reform component on it, because the Farm Bill isn't just agriculture. It's also your food stamp program and many of your food programs like that. And that version passed the House on a party line vote. Then it went to the Senate. The Senate didn't take that up because they realized the House passed a bill that didn't have any Democrat support. So they tried to do a more traditional farm bill and didn't even take up the welfare reform component. So when the Senate passed their version, the House passed its version, very different versions. There were some differences in agriculture, but very, very different versions with respect to food policy and to welfare reform. So what happened then, the House and the Senate couldn't easily get an agreement, so they appointed a conference committee. And I was fortunate to be one of the members of the conference committee, as well as Senator McConnell. And that's just a small group of people then that try to iron out the differences. And I will tell you, through the process, the things that held this vote up where we couldn't get a compromise blew me away. And I'm going to give you an example. We've all seen the devastation in California over the last few weeks with the Camp Fire that just devastated so many homes and businesses and lives and properties in California. Those same wildfires have happened over the last 2 years in Montana, Colorado, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, throughout the West. And if you heard the president talk, and I agree with the president on this, the problem is the forests haven't been managed very well. And we tried to have a forestry component in the Farm Bill that would allow the Forest Service to thin the timber out. We also had language in there to allow the utility companies to trim the limbs along the utility lines, because the Camp Fire started supposedly from a limb that fell on a utility line. But California has a law that you can't trim the limbs along the utility lines. So we tried to compromise the forestry component of the Farm Bill. And I thought when the forest fire broke out, the massive Camp Fire, well, we'll get this finished pretty quickly. It only got worse. And you know, you have to compromise, and it's like making sausage. Nobody wants to watch it. We don't mind looking at it, but our town friends don't want to watch sausage made, but they like their sausage. And it's the same way with compromising in legislation. It's a terrible, nasty process. In the end, we didn't even get language in there to allow the utilities to be able to cut the limbs, because the environmentalists in the western part of the United States wouldn't vote for any bill that would cut a tree limb or anything. I tried to explain, you know, I'm country like you all are. I'm like, you know, it's like your hair. If you cut it, it'll grow back, you know. But they, you know, common sense is lacking. And I might remind you, we have 6 representatives in Kentucky. We have 6 United States representatives in Kentucky, 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat. California has 53. 53. And after January the 1st, they'll have 47 Democrats and 6 Republicans. So the environmental component of the Farm Bill was controversial. The welfare reform component was controversial. In the end, there weren't many changes to the welfare component. I think that's a loss for the taxpayers. I think it's a loss for America, the employers desperately trying to find new workers. But it's a win for agriculture. It's a huge win. This bill strengthens the farm safety net. It promotes agriculture trade, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, and establishes programs. This is very important for the livestock farmers, because those of us in animal agriculture think that we get left out of the Farm Bill a lot of times. It's very grain-centric. But we've established programs to prepare for any type of livestock disease outbreak. There was money in there to create vaccine banks and things like that we in animal agriculture desperately need. So I think it's a win. It's a win for rural America because it establishes and provides funding for rural broadband. And representing Western Kentucky, I can tell you, we need to massively invest in our broadband infrastructure. If we're going to enhance and revitalize our rural communities, we're going to have to invest in the infrastructure. And it's not just roads and bridges and our locks and dams. It's also broadband, high-speed internet, wireless technologies. There's money in this Farm Bill to do that through public-private partnerships, not like that terrible Kentucky Wired project. This is projects that will go through legitimate projects, through the telephone companies and public-private partnerships, because you're going to have to subsidize a little bit to get the broadband into the rural areas where it's less populated. And this bill will begin to do that. I'm very excited about that. The steps to finish. We have an agreement. The bill's being printed. It's over 1,000 pages. Once it's printed, we're going to have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, because believe it or not, sometimes politicians try to stick things in there that aren't supposed to be in there. And a lot of times, there are technical errors in there, like Jeff mentioned about the nonprofits that happened in Frankfurt. So we've got to make sure when you're changing it all the way until the last minute, sometimes you don't write the language in there correctly. So that's going to be reviewed over the weekend through the first part of the week. I don't know with the funeral that will happen with President Bush what that's going to do to the timeline, but when I left yesterday, we were going to plan on trying to have a vote in the House Thursday or Friday of next week. So we will try to get the bill through the House. Then it'll go, before it goes to the House, the conference committee has to sign on to it. I'm going to sign on to it. I'm confident Senator McConnell's going to sign on to it. And let me say something about Senator McConnell. I didn't fully appreciate Senator McConnell probably until I got to Washington and saw the good work that he does for Kentucky. And we are very fortunate to have Senator McConnell in Washington. You know, I talk about, we have most members of Congress have no agriculture backgrounds. Senator McConnell has no agriculture backgrounds, but we would be in bad shape in agriculture without Senator McConnell. So I'm very, very fortunate to have a good working relationship with him. I'm very happy that he is majority leader in the United States Senate. The conference committee will sign on to the bill, then the vote on the House floor. Hopefully we'll get the votes, and you will see it's not going to pass by a big margin. It's going to be a close vote, just like every farm bill is. Then it'll go to the Senate. I think it'll get around 75 votes in the Senate. Then the president will sign it into law, and we'll have a farm bill that I hope you're all satisfied with. The next issue I want to mention is trade. I know exactly what's happened to the commodity prices because of the potential trade war. And I tell people, let's step back and look at why we're in this situation to begin with. I'm from Monroe County, and most of the rural counties in Kentucky are like Monroe County. When I was growing up in the 80s, early 90s, there were factories in all these little small towns, and most of them were garment factories, but they were good paying jobs. They paid a living wage, they provided health insurance, they provided a 401k. These were good jobs, and you could live in your small town. And when NAFTA passed, NAFTA was great for a lot of industries. It was tremendous for agriculture. We were probably the biggest winner in NAFTA of any industry in America. But there were massive losers as well. Manufacturing was one of them. Now, we still have a tremendous manufacturing base in America after NAFTA, but that base is located in urban and suburban areas. That base of manufacturing is located on the interstates, in communities that have rail spurs, in communities that have ports. But the rural communities that aren't fortunate enough to have an interstate, aren't fortunate enough to have rail or a river port, they've taken it on the chin in NAFTA. And most people that farm are part-time farmers, or most people that farm have a spouse that work off the farm. And that spouse is the one, through their employer, usually has health insurance to allow their other spouse to continue to farm and to be able to provide health insurance for the children. If we don't reverse the trend in manufacturing in rural America, then we're going to lose a lot of family farmers. It doesn't matter what the price of corn or soybeans is, because there are going to be no opportunities in those small towns for the spouse to work or for the farmer to have a part-time job. In order to enhance and revitalize rural America, in order to bring rural America back to where it was before NAFTA, in my opinion, we have to do it through manufacturing, good paying manufacturing jobs. We're not going to attract those good paying manufacturing jobs to rural America if we don't reverse this trend with China to where China has a competitive advantage and they're producing everything we purchase at Walmart significantly cheaper than we can produce it in the United States. And we can compete with China in the United States if we're on a level playing field. Presidents in both parties have complained about China, the trade deficit growing with China, especially with respect to manufacturing, for many, many years, but they've never done anything about it. President Trump said, I campaigned on it, and I'm going to do something about it. And for better or worse, he's drawn a line in the sand. And I believe that something did need to be done with China. I want to try to negotiate a fair trade agreement, because what China does is the biggest thing, the press talks about they steal our patents, they steal our intellectual property, and they do that. And we need a trade agreement that addresses that and punishes China for doing that. But the biggest thing they do to have a competitive advantage is they manipulate their currency. If they need a strong dollar, they'll make it to where the United States has a strong dollar. If they need it to be a weak dollar, they change their currency. We have a Federal Reserve, and most developed countries have a Federal Reserve, a version of the Federal Reserve, that sets interest rates and has jurisdiction over currency. China does whatever they want to make sure that they win. And we cannot continue to do that. So we've seen the president negotiate a better deal with Mexico and Canada. And if you're a dairy farmer, I know how hard you all are struggling. One of the main points in negotiating that new NAFTA deal with Canada, the president said, is we're going to have a fair dairy policy with Canada. And this new deal does have a fair dairy policy with Canada. We can now export to Canada. They cannot put tariffs on us. They cannot block our milk and milk products at the boundary anymore between the United States and Canada. So I feel like the president, we didn't know what kind of deal he would negotiate, did do a good deal. And remember, we had a good deal already with NAFTA, except in certain commodities, but manufacturing, we didn't have the best deal with NAFTA. Now it's a level playing field. That has given the president momentum now with China. And I'm like you, I want to get this deal done. I know how many soybeans are in storage. I understand that we've got to make decisions on what to plant in the next few months. I'm hopeful that the president, they're still in talks this week. He's in conversations probably as we speak with China. Hopefully we can get a deal, get a level playing field, and we can get that market back. I believe that if we can get a deal in the next few months, that we won't lose a bushel from a contract from China with respect to soybeans. So I wanted to mention that. The last thing I've talked about the Farm Bill, I talked about trade. And let me conclude by saying I am confident that we'll get a good trade deal. I believe the president, he really wants to help the people that like him. Right? Everybody agrees with that, right? If you don't like him, probably not as high on his priority list. He knows rural America likes him. I mean, you just had a test a couple of weeks ago, and you look at that map in the United States. If it was rural, it was good. If it was the less rural it got, the harder it became. So he wants to help farmers. I've talked to him. We have a great Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, and great groups like Farm Bureau that are leading with him. The last thing, the ag workers. I believe that one of the positive things that will happen, if anything positive can happen with Pelosi as Speaker of the House, one of the positive things that I think will happen, I do think we can get a compromise on certain issues. I think we can get a compromise on an infrastructure bill. And I'm going to do everything in my ability to see that there's more funding for locks and dams to where we can continue to put our grain on the Ohio, Cumberland, Tennessee, and Mississippi rivers and get them to New Orleans and wherever they need to go. I also am confident that we can get an immigration bill that's good for agriculture. We have to be able to get more workers in here. As I said, with every business in America, there's a shortage of workers. We have an available workforce with migrant workers. We just have to be able to get them here, streamline the process, make it cheaper, and that's going to help the economy. That's going to be able to help us in agriculture. I do believe that there will be a greater rate of success in the next session of Congress to do that, and I know that's an issue with just about every single person in here. I will close by saying I hope everyone can come to the Farm Bureau Congressional Tour in February. This will be my third year. I'll be starting my third year in Congress, and one of the highlights of the year is when everyone from Farm Bureau comes to Washington, and we get to give them a tour of the Capitol at night. Speaker Paul Ryan would give us permission to go out on the Speaker's balcony. I don't know that will happen with Pelosi this time, but we'll at least get a tour of the Capitol, and always enjoy answering questions and listening to the concerns and listening to the ideas that you have on how we can improve policy, improve rural America, protect our conservative values, and all the things that Farm Bureau stands for. Thank you for the work that you do. When you have those monthly Farm Bureau meetings, when you have those district meetings, when you come to Louisville and have your state convention, and you have the policy meetings, that matters. The policy platform that you all approve, I guess it's today, matters. The legislators read it. Everybody wants to have the support of Farm Bureau. So I appreciate the work you do. Thank you for your support and friendship over the years. I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you all very much.